Hi, and welcome to another episode of More Bang for Her Buck. This is a show that's about women and money, and we promise to keep the conversation jargon-free because so much of our freedom is tied into our ability to pay bills, right? If you want to leave an unhappy marriage or an unsafe workplace, sometimes you just need enough money to be able to get out, and that's what this show is all about. Today on the show, I have a dear friend. I affectionately call her Crispy, but Christine Peacock, who would like to be introduced as a DIY investor. So Crispy and I had our first conversation about money 2 years ago in a parking lot in JLT, and that's where a lot of what we're doing today on the show sparked off, because that's when I realized that I actually don't know anything about my money, and for someone who's so empowered and accomplished, I was in a pretty bad place. So Crispy's on the show today to help us. Can I say that, Crispy?
Yes.
Okay. So Crispy's on the show today to help us answer some of the questions that you guys have sent in on our Instagram accounts and on our DMs and on YouTube and on our emails. So welcome to the show, Crispy.
Hi, Malu. Happy to be here.
I'm so glad you could finally be a part of this show.
Absolutely.
So I want to start by asking, I think one of the big stories that comes out of Dubai, and everyone in this country has a friend who's been in this situation, is the debt story. Because you come to Dubai and you think like, oh my God, suddenly life is like super expensive. I need to put furniture on my card. I need to put my whatever expenses I have to pay these bills for the next couple of months. I put on my card. Before you know it, you're a couple of years in and you've maxed out credit cards and you feel like you can never dig yourself out of that mess. To those of us who've messaged in with stories like that, how do we get out of it?
I think you can absolutely get out of it. I've been here, so like everyone who came here for 2 years, I came here for 1 year, and it's been almost 23 years now. Debt isn't the reason I'm still here, but I did manage to get out of debt twice and actually came from a negative balance. So I understand when your listeners say that they're nervous about debt, they want to get out of it. Is there a way out? Yes, there's absolutely a way out. There are a few different ways, right? So the first thing is look at what you're spending on and stop the habit of spending more, and especially on credit cards, right? Because credit cards are like, it's the worst kind of debt that you can have, right? Once you've got that, you can negotiate with the bank. You can speak to them and see if you can cut a deal.
Okay, so that I didn't know, right? So what you're saying is that, let's say, here's my friend, she's maxed out her credit card. She doesn't feel like she can pay it back. How do you do it? You just like call the bank and say, can I speak to one of your reps? And then you say, I don't know how to pay it back.
So most likely they'll be calling you before you call them, right? The first thing is don't avoid their calls, okay? Yeah. Show that you are willing to pay and you want to do this, right? But maybe you need some time. Maybe the amount that they're asking you to pay is not something you can do, right? Especially if you're in a position of having multiple loans, if you have, like a car loan and credit card and, right? Look into what you're doing at work as well. So one thing that's very important, if you're employed and you're in the situation of credit card debt, is to make sure that you keep your employment, right? So don't let it stress you to the point where it's impacting your work negatively and you start messing up, and then, that's not a good place to be in, right? Yeah. So I know it sounds hard to do, but then look into upskilling and look into how you can negotiate your way into earning more, right? Look into things that you can do a side hustle, right? Now Dubai has opened up, I think maybe a year or two ago, that you can have a second job, right? So if you've got a skill, if you've got something and you've got the time, start doing that on the weekends, right? Or after work, right? Look into how you can supplement your income and then start paying off sooner. But you've got to cut that habit of spending and that spiral, because it's a slippery slope.
It really is. And I think one of the misconceptions, or at least here's the story, we all think if you maxed out your credit card, you must have been out there shopping for Louis Vuittons and like saying next round of drinks is on me. Was that your story? Is that a lot of people's story?
I think so. Dubai has a mix, right? There are lots of people, and especially from the subcontinent, right? There are people who come here to give their families a better life. There are also people who come here because they think it's a happening place to be, and it's very easy to get caught up in the trap of keeping up with the Joneses. Yeah. So I think there's a mix of all kinds here. But whatever the debt is now, this goes a bit into family relationships as well, right? If it's your family back home or your family here or your spouse or your partner who's actually racking up that debt, then that's a discussion you've got to have, right? Because other than basics, you shouldn't be spending on your credit card for somebody else to, live lavishly.
Yeah, we had a story actually just like in the last 24 hours where we had somebody who's taken loans and racked up credit card debt, and now the wife has to sort of pay it off, and they're on the verge of a divorce, and now it's getting into messy sort of territory. So if you have debt which you've not necessarily taken, but now you're in a position where you've got to pay it back, where do we start even?
So unfortunately, if the debt is on your name, you're liable to the bank, right? You can't go to the bank and say, hey, I took this for somebody else.
Yeah.
But hindsight's always 20/20, but it's better to not get into these situations in the first place.
Yeah.
Or if it's a spouse and then you're headed for divorce, if you have correspondence between the both of you on email or WhatsApp, that can help you. But again, you'd have to get a lawyer to help you fight that case.
Yeah.
And that's another expense. But if it's a significant amount, you'd rather do that and use that as proof that it all wasn't from you, and the partner's got to bear their bit of responsibility as well.
So right about hindsight being 20/20.
Yeah.
Because so basically, if you're listening to us right now, and first of all you feel like unsurmountable debt, try and speak to the bank. I think that's one big takeaway. The second big takeaway is that this is a negotiable situation. You can get out of it. It does not necessarily mean that you have to run away from the country or that you have to end.
Absolutely. And especially if you're a young person and you've got a good number of years ahead of you, the last thing you want to do is run away from it.
Yeah.
Because then it means your re-entry to the country is in jeopardy.
Yeah.
And assuming
potential new opportunities as well.
Exactly.
And I think if someone else if you're borrowing money for someone else, how much ever you might love them and however great and rosy the situation might be, whether that's a brother, a sister, a mom, a dad, a partner, try and put it on email. I think that's such a great idea. I mean, I've not done that in all the years that I've lived here. So thanks for that. Thanks. Okay, when we come back, Christine introduced me to the concept of FIRE, and I was really intrigued by it. But who are these people who are retiring at 35, and what are they doing that I'm not doing? So we'll come back and answer those questions. More bang for her buck is a really important conversation around women and money. And if you think that you can contribute, and by this I mean if you've got a case study, a story that you'd like us to discuss with our experts, if you've got a bit of research that you think we should include in the show, or there's an opinion that you think we should feature, we would love to hear from you. Do drop us a DM on Instagram, or you can just email us at info@brownontheoutside.com. And now on to the second part of our questions and conversations. So we got a lot of questions about people saying, hey, I would love to retire early, but it just seems like I don't even know where to start. You introduced me actually to this idea of FIRE, which is financially independent retire early. Is that it?
Yes,
Yeah.
That's
and
right.
I remember you sending me some podcasts and listening to it and thinking, wow, this is a very cool idea. So can you run us through this idea and this concept? What is it all about?
So, FIRE is a concept, again, speaking to the Desi audience. I don't think any of us really thought about retirement. We only thought about retirement in the traditional sense, right? You're at the end of your career, you're 60, 65, and you're old, and that's when you retire and you start gardening or you start praying, you start sending good morning WhatsApps.
From your company.
Yeah, you don't do, and that's like downhill, right? From there, you don't do anything more with your life. So the FIRE subculture, and it's really like a counterculture, which is saying, hey, let's kick the 9 to 5 in its ass. Why are we trading our time for money? Because let's face it, most of us who are in jobs are not, unless, I mean, yes, when you're in a job, it's not like you really love that job and that's something you're going to do for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
Or you want to do for the rest of your life. You're going to have constantly the threat of new technology, new people coming in, and you're going to have to keep upskilling, right?
Yeah.
And then, again, the higher you climb a corporate ladder, there's more of your time that is expected of you, right? These days, and especially in Dubai, a 70, 75-hour week is very normal. So what's left? You're giving the dregs of your life to your family, to your health, and a lot of things get put on the shelf, right? So the concept of being financially independent is to have an option to stop trading your time for money, right?
Okay.
And the way that the group, so the philosophy that I follow is low-cost index investing. Right. So I first got interested in this by listening to a US-based podcast called Choose FI. And I remember it was episode 38, which was the why of FI, right? First identifying that why do you want to be financially independent, right? You've got to have something that is driving you, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I think the big shift happened after I became a mom. And I became a mom later in life, meaning I've got less years to run down. And I think my money mindset prior to that was very naive, right? I always had the idea that, money comes and it goes and you spend and it wasn't like I was just living for today or living it up, but I wasn't really too fussed about the future.
Yeah.
Having a child changes all that. Right? Changes a lot of things, but that's like one of the big things for me. So I got more and more interested in this. And then I read a book that's recommended on the UAE chapter of the Choose FI podcast. There's a very active Facebook group called Simply FI.
Right.
And Andrew Hallam, who's the author of Millionaire Expat, visited Dubai in 2019, pre-COVID, and he gave a couple of talks. And I went to his talks and heard him live, and I heard other members of this group live, and it just all made sense.
So when I hear the words retire early, I'm thinking this is for some millionaire kid, right? This is not for people like me, not at my income level. But from what I understand, no matter what your income level is, you can retire early. That's the concept, correct?
That is the concept, and time is your biggest asset, right? So if you start, now I've been here almost 23 years. I kick myself now at how late I learned this lesson.
Yeah.
But if I had started earlier, and of course, your salary climbs as you go, but you always think, oh, I'm not earning enough to invest, right?
Yeah.
I just don't have that huge lump sum to put in. So let me just take a holiday instead, or let me just buy that pair of shoes or that bag, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But it's so untrue. And it's also untrue that you have to live an extremely frugal life, right?
Like because that's my other fear, right? If I want to retire early, what does it mean? I can never get a manicure because that manicure is really important to me, or whatever that luxury is, whatever that small luxury is in my life, right?
Absolutely not, right? It's about identifying what your goal is, right? First, your why of FI. Why are you doing it, right? And then you identify how much you need.
And how much you need is, I need to basically figure out how much my life costs today and how much, like, what is that number?
Yeah, so there are a few thumb rules. And one of them is that 25 years of your living expenses is what you need to be able to retire.
Okay.
Assuming that the market is going to give you an average rate of return of 8%. Now, in some years, it could be 10, 12. In some, it could be 7 or 5, but an average rate of 8. And then you have something called a safe withdrawal rate, which, again, lots of studies, you can, be pedantic about it, but the rough number is 4%. So saying that once you have hit that FIRE number, you then withdraw 4% of that every year.
Okay.
Right?
And that's what helps
you. And that
you
is going to help you live for the rest of your life comfortably.
And you take the rest, so you start putting away this chunk of money to arrive at this big number, but you don't just like stack it up under the mattress until it reaches the magic number. So let's say the magic number is, I don't know, 20 million. Seems like a really scary number. But I will not be able to store 20 million under my mattress. So what am I to do in the interim until I touch the magic number?
So to get that number, you need to start in investing in low-cost index funds, right? Okay. And there are multiple ways to do it. If you want to start small, there is a local company, a robo-advisor called Sarwa. Okay. You can start with them. Once you reach a certain threshold, you can then go direct to a broker, right? The broker I use is Interactive Brokers. It's as easy as going to their website, filling out a few forms, supplying documentation like your proof of address, your residency proof.
Emirates ID, yevo.
Yes. Yeah. You get approved and then you start funding your account. Okay. Right?
I'm curious to understand how, what first of all, the word index fund, immediately I'm like, big word. So we'll come back and we'll kind of unjargon the index fund. And then we'll also talk about what some of your other options might be. So what is an SIP, what is real estate, gold, and how do you start, where do you put your money, how do you open their account? But we'll come back after a tiny break. If you're listening to us on Spotify or watching us on YouTube, but you don't follow us on Instagram yet, then please do. All you've got to do is search for More Bang for Her Buck or Brown on the outside and hit follow. Okay, so now the part of the show where we actually do the DIY investing idea. First of all, why DIY? Okay, why not just like call a bank guy? Because everyone's got a bank guy who's been trying to reach them about money.
So 20 years ago, it was the LIC uncle. Now it's the bank guy.
Yeah.
But they're all out to make their commission, right? I mean, that's what they do.
Okay.
And if you can do something yourself, and I think the overarching message that I want to bring is that you can do it yourself. You absolutely can. You do not need a finance degree. You do not need an economics degree to understand this. If you understand compounding, you can do this yourself. If you can fill out a form, and all of us have filled out those visa forms. This is much easier than a visa form, right? So if you can fill that out, you can do it yourself. Why would you want to spend? I mean, why would you want to pay commission to somebody else to manage funds for you when you're in control?
Okay,
right?
So I have a question. I have a guy who is taking money from me every month and he puts it into mutual funds. When I asked him, are you getting a kickback from the mutual fund company? He said, no, he's not. So how is he making his money? Why should I be suspicious of bank guy number one?
So maybe it's the terminology. It's not kickback, but it's a commission, right? A mutual fund is actively managed, right? And when it's actively managed, there is a fund manager, and they take their fees. Now their fees may look minuscule in terms of being less than 1%, but it all adds up, right? And if you're looking at investing, it's a long-term game, right? It's a few decades, ideally, right? Over time, we can do the math, and I'm happy to do this with any of the listeners, honestly. Anyone who's not convinced that this is the way or thinks that they can't do it, I'm a total Excel geek and I can help help out with that. But you can actually see how much money you would be losing by going through a bank guy versus doing it yourself.
Okay. All right. So the other thing keeping me from doing this is that I don't understand the stock market and I have enough on my plate. I'm running a company. I've got life, groceries, dhobiwala, like there's a lot going on. I don't have time to get up and check this index every morning and watch CNBC, okay?
Yeah, you don't have to. Right? So if you were investing in individual companies and this is what we would have heard about maybe 20, 25 years ago, oh, so-and-so uncle lost all his savings in the stock market, right? But that's because he put it all in one company or a few companies, right? And then things can change overnight, right? If, there's a chemical leak or there's a breach of trust, that company that was performing very well can just go bust, right? And then you lose all your money. ETF investing takes care of all that for you, right? So you can choose to invest in an ETF that follows a fund. You can choose the S&P 500. You can choose an all-world fund.
Wait. You said big words. Wait. Let's take it back. So what you're telling me is don't call bank guy number one. He doesn't have to do this mutual fund stuff for you. He's getting a commission. You'd much rather do it yourself. Okay. Don't do the stock market thing because you may not have the time to manage individual stocks and shares.
Pick stocks. Yeah.
You don't pick stocks. So what you're asking me to do is put it into something called an index fund. Now, first of all, what an index fund is a list of companies. Am I correct?
Yes.
But then it's the same thing as a company, isn't it?
No, but it's a basket of stocks. So your risk is diversified, right? So it's the fund that's always choosing, say, the top 100 or the top 500.
Right.
And if there's one of those companies that's not performing, it automatically gets dropped off that list and replaced by another one.
Okay. So to break that down, from what I understand, it's like I'm not betting on Google as a company, I'm betting on the top 10 of a class, which means tomorrow Google doesn't do badly, the other kid who does well and is in the top 10 of the class, I'm benefiting off his or her wealth and wealth generation.
Exactly.
Or whatever. Okay, cool. So that's an index fund. What is an SIP? Because I know that one of the first things my mother tells me when I say that ABC wants to start investing, she says, ask her to just call the bank and start an SIP. What is an SIP?
So the term SIP is systematic investment plan. And it could be anything, right? It could be like years ago you had your chit funds and your gold where you're paying a jeweler every month, right? That's just an SIP. But it's where is that money going from an SIP? If it's in India, it's most likely going into a mutual fund.
Okay.
Because that's the terminology they use to funnel funds into a mutual fund.
It's basically like a plan that tells you that every month you put X amount and that will still go to the mutual fund bank guy number one.
So it's like your recurring deposit in a bank, right? Where you say every month siphon out this amount from my salary account and move it into this account.
So you've met my friend. My friend has $500 to invest every month. It's not a lot of money. She feels like, okay, you've just told me don't put in SIP, don't put in mutual fund. What's she going to do with this money? What is the minimum entry level to get into this index fund business?
So with 500, it would probably be Sarwa, which is the UAE's robo-advisor.
Right.
And then after you reach a threshold, a minimum threshold, I think it's 10,000 USD, then you can go directly to interactive brokers, because below that, the fee that they would charge you wouldn't make sense.
Okay. So a lot of people at that 500, 1,000, 2,000 a month amount are thinking of buying gold, putting it away in a gold coin. So yes, no, maybe?
No, because
Why?
Again, physical gold, storage and security, right? You're going to constantly be worrying about where it is, tracking it and tracking those multiple gold coins, right? The other thing is that studies have shown that the stock market has outperformed real estate and gold consistently over the last few decades.
Okay.
Right? So why would you want to invest in an asset class which is performing worse?
The only guy calling me more than bank guy number one is real estate guy number one.
And in the UAE especially.
So in a really quick 30-second way, you don't think real estate is the way to go?
Personally, no.
Okay. Because it doesn't do as well.
It doesn't do as well, and it depends what kind of real estate, right? If it's a house that you're going to live in, that's not really an investment, right? Because you're tying up your money into something that's not earning you money. It'll only earn you probably at the time you sell, by which time, it's not a given that you're going to make a profit. You could just end up selling it for the same amount that you bought it for.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, so big takeaways from the show is, number one, if you're in debt, don't worry, it's okay. People have gotten out of it. As you said, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, and you still survived. So it's possible. Negotiate with the bank. Once you've gotten out of that, first try to pay off your credit card debt, because that's the worst
kind
of the lot. And then after that, start putting away your emergency fund and then start investing. And if you're going to invest, even if it's just $500 a month, it's possible to do it in an index fund as opposed to some of the other options. And you said it would take less than an hour to fill out all the forms?
Less than an hour.
Yeah, and then in a couple of days you get approved, and then they start trading it for you.
Yes.
Okay, great.
We've oversimplified it, but we can go more in depth.
But I would rather have oversimplified than overcomplicated. We'll go with that. If you guys have a question, Crispy's here, and she's, like she said, I mean, she offered it herself. She's an Excel genius, so she'll be able to help out. Please do leave us your questions. I think this is such an important conversation to have. So thanks so much, Crispy, for being on the show.
Thanks, Malu. All the best with the show.
Thank you. This show is produced by Brown on the Outside. A thank you to our production team, The Dark Room, our producer, Sarah Anand, research and intern, Hiral Verma, and on hair and makeup, Neha Shah.